Happy New Year. Somebody asked a great question recently about how far their speakers should be from the wall. I mentioned that it's helpful to try your speakers close to the wall if you're not getting enough bass out of them. And the reason being the speaker boundary interference. This isn't something I specialize in, but everybody who does what I do, he learns this stuff, and we learn it as best as we can. But in the same way that we may spend hours and hours and hours a day mixing things, there's people out there who do nothing but the acoustic side of this. But what I want you to realize is those people as well. It's not a unanimous thing on you always do this in your room, no matter what. It's never the case. They all know, and they talk about the fact that differences in the room, there's so many variables. Most rooms aren't totally symmetrical unless you build your room by a professional, and you won't mistake that for anything else because you probably will have had to mortgage your house, or you spent as much as an expensive car. You did a lot of things like this, or you didn't do it with a professional. And the point, what I'm trying to say is, you don't have to do that, but you either do that or you do what I'm explaining. And what I'm explaining is the same thing you'll read and learn on every channel that tries to tell you about acoustic treatment, which is, we'll give you a bunch of things that could probably work for your situation, but there's far too many variables to account for. And as a result, we'll tell you 70, 80%, this may correct your problems, but it's like a weatherman. We thought the storm was going to blow in and it's going to come this way, but the weather happened. It turned the other way. What are we going to do? The weathermen keep their job, and it's the same thing in this acoustic field kind of profession. The same exact thing. They keep their job no matter what, and the guys that hire the pros, like the guys who have the money for that, they don't care how many times the pros got to come back and stand in their space and recalculate measurements. Oh, we didn't account for this. We didn't account for this. And they keep coming back. And they keep getting paid to come back in order to fix these problems. Just like a weatherman, they anticipate what it's going to be based on all their acquired knowledge. And then the real room comes into play. It's no longer theoretical. The problem with a lot of people watching videos on what should be the case is it's all theoretical, all of it, until you put the stuff in your room and you try it out. And you take measurements, and you don't just take measurements on a frequency EQ curve. You actually look at the waterfall measurements, which have to do with time, decay of the sound, how long it takes to decay, and when it reaches its loudest point. In other words, a big problem that people think you can just EQ around is not actually possible to EQ around. And that's the time. You can't change how long something takes to decay or not with an EQ. You also can't create a sound that is being canceled out. So EQ doesn't work in a lot of cases that you would need it to work in order to really get a flat sound based on the particular dimensions and room modes that you may be experiencing based on your room. So this is why that, combined with, I could name so many things that can't possibly be accounted for just by you explaining something to somebody who's going to tell you how to do it remotely. That's still the best way to go, because most of us can't mortgage our house or buy another car in acoustic treatment. It's not possible. So because of that, people like me and a lot of other people, we invest in acoustic treatment and just go with what should work, the best possible estimation, theoretically. And then we still got to take measurements. We still got to guess and check. Still got to move stuff around, adjust. Keep doing that until we're satisfied. There's a reason Eric Valentine took over a year to build his room. There's a reason. That's the engineer's engineer. As far as he'll keep doing it until it's right, keep changing the panels, keep doing different treatments, do everything he can. Still took him over a year. Now, if it takes him that long, you think you're just going to guess and get it right? That's the same logic with somebody who's only mixed 3 songs in their whole life, but they think they could sit down and compete with somebody who has the acquired knowledge of 30 years of mixing. You think you could do that? There's no chance. The acquired knowledge will beat every time the person who, oh, I seen somebody do this with the attack and release, so I'm going to do that. The acquired knowledge guy is doing it because he knows why he's twisting the knob. He knows why he's twisting it every step of the way, which knob, why to twist, which plug-in, which piece of whatever. He knows everything about that in terms of the why before he makes the move. The other guy's just going based on something he saw once. It's totally different. The acquired knowledge is everything. So acoustically, there's the same kind of thing where there's an acquired knowledge. But what I want you to know is no matter how much research you do, if you didn't live that acquired knowledge over 30 or 40 years the same way a mixer would need to, you're always going to be coming to the table a little bit short of information, no matter what. And that's why you could watch a lot of videos and I get a comment like, you know, I heard it's always supposed to be 3-4 feet off the wall. A lot of things play into this. The dimensions of your room completely play into this, because what you're not thinking about is the speaker boundary interference thing. Let me just give you that. There's this trade-off where depending on the size of your room, depending on everything, how much treatment you have up, how close you are to your speakers, a lot of things are going to play into this. But the speakers don't just fire forwards. Sound emits from the speakers in all directions. And that means some of it is actually going behind it. And as a result, sometimes when you're 3-4 feet off the wall, what will happen is it will fire at the wall and also forward, and they wind up canceling each other out, creating a big null that's very hard to deal with. Whereas when you put the speakers closer to the wall, you get less of that. This isn't always the case because a lot of it depends on what's behind you also. It depends on so many things. Like I said, the amount of treatment, the size of your room, all factors in. Now, this is to say also that no matter what room you have to work with, you can make it better than it is no matter what, 100%. Couple basic guidelines for that. More coverage is better, always. More coverage is better. That's why if budget's not an issue, you cover up most of it, and at least then you know you've got a full range of the frequency spectrum dealt with. Now you may just have issues in the low end in a certain place, for example, but at least you've dealt with a lot of the issues. Now, how you cover matters because I've said before, most important thing is the thickness of the panel, most important, and then the air gap behind it. So air gap can't exceed the panel depth. And you want air gap and a panel that's very thick to deal with most of your problems. Okay? 1-inch panel, don't do it. 2-inch panel, You get what I'm saying? 4 inches better. 6 inches better than 4-inch. That's the point. So you want a deep panel. You want as much of the room covered as possible, not just the corners. You want to deal with as much of every surface area as you can covered. This is where fabric wall is a good thing, but I also think it's good and bad because there's no air gap behind it. So it's like, it's almost better to have an air gap and not deal with the fabric wall system, in my opinion, at this point. Also because those things are very, very expensive. So you wind up probably getting away cheaper when you don't do it. But let's go deeper. The corners, you know, my room now, I took out the corners, but it's less effective than it could be because there's actually a lot of the cinder block still around in my room, and I think that creates huge bass problems for me. I mean, the room modes themselves, the dimensions are causing crazy problems where it's super hard to hear low end. And I've got the one subwoofer. Somebody suggested trying a second subwoofer. I got the Trinov, but like I said, the Trinov can't possibly correct some of these problems, specifically low end problems, because when there's a huge lack of it, it can't put it there. It can, all you do when you add EQ to a thing where there's a lack of it because of a problem with cancellation, all you're doing is driving your speaker harder. That's it. So you're creating distortion in your speaker, but you're not actually solving the problem. the way to solve the problem would be to move the speakers, move your desk, try different things. That would be the way to solve it. Now, where I'm at specifically, I'm kind of boxed in because I can't really move. And that's why I'm going to try another mix room, because where I'm at is so difficult to be able to manipulate any kind of movement. Things have to be where they are, or I can't get around enough things to get to, like, the camera, the lights, the stuff, but like to be able to unplug equipment or plug it in, to be able to get to stuff, get to the patch bay. I need to be able to walk around things. I need to be able to move, and I can't even do it here because that's what I mean by I'm boxed in. That, combined with the fact that some of this stuff, some of my place is got windows into live rooms and things like that, which makes it harder to be able to treat. You can't hang panels on a place with windows, so you wind up needing gobos, but the room I'm in is kind of narrow for that, and as a result makes it where if I put gobos there, now I can't walk around the stuff. I can't get to the things the way I would want to. So I'm in this weird boxed in situation. Now, I've tried to make it work in this room for a very long time. And now I'm at the point where any problems different than the ones I have in here have to be better. They have to be, because I know I'm fighting with all my hands tied behind my back at this point. And, you know, it's too many hands behind my back. It's not conducive to getting stuff done quickly and improving. It's very conducive to spending a lot of time wasted, and I have to change that. So part of what I do here is extremely honest, upfront, and a lot of times it's not the stuff you want to hear. It's just reality, and I don't like people sugarcoating things for me, so I don't sugarcoat. Like I said, I gave this years in this room trying to make this work. No good, no good. If I had put up, maybe, you know, if I covered the cinder block before I started, maybe it would have been better. If I focused more on what I was trying to achieve, which was a perfect mix room, you know, and there are no perfect rooms, but a better mix room, I wouldn't have put the windows up into the live room. That wouldn't have been a concern. The treatment would have been more of a concern. So really, I want to put an emphasis on focus on what's important to you the most. Don't try to get everything to work, as, you know, so you can do it all. If you're not going to do it all, just do the thing you want, or you'll be getting half results of all sorts of everything that you want to do instead of a better result out of the thing that you really want, the one thing. Focus on that. That's a big tip. But anyway, so I'm in a position where I've learned so much to try to really pick up things. And what I've found is the more you listen, the more you read. A lot of guys will tell you to set up the wide way in the room, you know, not the narrow way. But that's not actually, if you listen to enough. I found, you know, Haverstick Designs, which is one of the biggest players in the game, talking about, you know, videos with him with Warren talking about set up facing the short wall in a rectangular room, not the long wall. Set up facing a short wall. I also found people saying the opposite, like I said, but I found, you know, Mixbuzz TV. We got to respect David, of course. He's talking about facing the short wall also. That's a better move in a room that's where you have your rectangle, face the short wall, don't face the wide wall. So once you hear this stuff enough, you realize it's really both sides. You're going to, the more you listen, the more you get both sides. But the big player, like Haverstick Designs, is probably the biggest player. That's, if you want to work in that level, you're spending a lot of money to get that kind of a result, but you're also getting the guy who's going to show up, keep showing up to make it great. But again, it's very similar to a weather forecast. They can predict a lot and then make moves on that, but they're not always going to be able to account for every variable. Just like the wind could change, and now the storm ain't blowing in, it's blowing over there, or now it's 18 inches of snow instead of 2. How many times have we been in this situation with the weather? You can totally get what I mean. The weathermen keep their jobs, and the people that do the acoustics keep their jobs, because everyone understands there's too many variables to quantify. So it'd be impossible to always predict the right answer. So when I go back to the question about the speakers, it's all about your individual room. you got to try it in all directions. And this got nothing to do with rear ported or what kind of like if the speaker's being ported in any direction doesn't change the physics of the fact that the sound fires out. Bass specifically doesn't just go straight. It's not, the sound just doesn't go the forward direction. So because of that, if you're far enough off the wall, at a certain point it may be good, and past that may be worse, and closer to the wall may give you more of a bass response, which means you may be able to treat that problem easier because of not even more of a bass response, where that frequency bump in bass is on the spectrum. In other words, it might be, you know, it might be 80 hertz or 120 hertz, or just it might be, it's going to be lower or higher depending on how close the speaker is to the wall. That's the point. And at a certain point, it gets easier to treat with treatment than others. So there's also specific traps designed for specific frequencies. So that's why a lot of companies, the guys that know them, the guys who aren't trying to sell you on things, will always tell you, this is the move. You get rid of the full broadband frequency spectrum problems first. And mainly, the deeper, the thicker the traps, the better. So you can solve as much of the low end stuff, the low mid stuff as you can. But if you have issues at that point, once you get the measurements and find out where that specific issue is, you can then treat that specifically with certain types of panels. That's the, you know, the Helmholtz resonators and the things like just the different stuff that focuses, it's very specifically finely tuned for a frequency. So what that means is you can't start with that. You start with the other stuff, and then you see what's left as a problem, and then you deal with that. And that's the only way to do it. It's not like you could guess and get it right. You don't know what your problem is until you have the problem. And, you know, someone like me, I know wholeheartedly going in, I'm going to have to move around a bunch to see better, worse. I'm going to have to make the speakers closer to the wall, better, worse. Further wall, better, worse. Further, better, worse. Move my listening position closer, better, worse. Further, better, worse. I need to keep doing the better, worse thing until I'm satisfied. And I hope to be done with this in a way that makes any sense, that I'm happy in less than a year. And I hope to get it on the first couple tries, but that's the same concept with somebody who's like never mixed a song. You're going to get it right on the first couple tries. So, you know, and I've set up in multiple different places. I have a kind of idea, but I know it's based on the exact room situation I'm dealing with. So there's no getting around how many times I'm going to have to move. You have to be open to it. Enjoy the journey. It's the best thing I can tell you. Enjoy the journey. You have to, because otherwise you just beat yourself up for so long, and at the same time, you will be upset. Whereas you could be moving and doing all this knowing at some point you will be happy because your room will be significantly better than it is before you started. And that's what I'm hoping for. I know that will make me happy beyond possible explanation. I could never explain exactly how happy I'll be when I don't have the problems I have now. Literally, I will be on cloud 9 because where I'm at now, it's like trying to fly a plane blind most of the time. And the way I compensate for that, 4 different pairs of headphones, car trips, everything everybody knows that you do. But when you're doing that, you're not doing as much improving on a daily basis as you could be doing. And that's what I want. And that's what you guys should want. You should want to improve consistently in a linear fashion, forward, not backwards and forwards, and then 2 steps back and 3 forward, and then 5 back and 4 forward. It's like you're always losing ground. So what I'm saying is, if you want to be able to actually fly the plane, consider doing it without blinders on, which means get your room figured out no matter how long it takes, no matter how much you got to move stuff around. All right. And anybody who thinks that it doesn't matter because people listen on an iPhone or something, it's a ridiculous concept. You need to be able to make the mix as great as possible so that it can be listened to on crappy speakers and still sound not crappy, no matter how you look at it. It needs to hold up in all environments, you know? And if you're somebody who just is doing this for fun and this seems hard and crazy and all that, it is. But at some point, you are going to say to yourself, my stuff doesn't sound as good as I want. And when you do, no piece of gear is going to be able to fix that if you can't hear the problems that are problems in the room you're in. No piece of gear is going to help you. You won't know where, you still won't hear the problems. No matter how good it makes the parts you can hear better, you can't hear the problems. So you can't fix anything. So you can't then know what it's going to sound like in other places. So you're always guessing, you're always upset, you're always like, man, I got to make a change based on something I can't ever hear. What's the point? You wind up being that, to me, that right there creates turmoil, which creates stress, which makes what we're doing, which we're supposed to love, even harder. So don't get in this ridiculous position by investing in things before you've dealt with the big issues. Do not buy foam. Don't buy any foam. Don't buy panels that are only 1 inch thick. And also, one other thing, if your room dimensions are like numbers that divide into themselves, a lot of people will tell you that's not good. In other words, like, you don't want an 8-foot ceiling in a 16-foot, by 16-foot room. But you know whose dimensions are exactly those? Or who, I don't know if that's still the case for him, but I know that at one time it was Serban. Serban's dimensions were 8-foot ceiling, 16 by 16. Those numbers divide into themselves just the same way, that they're not supposed to, in order to have something. I mean, like, that's the worst possible scenario. I don't know how to cut that any clearer. It's just based on everything you read, though, that's not good. But he was able to do great things in a room like that, which got him more and more and more work, and he kept improving. Now, that's to say, any room is workable, even one that has dimensions that go into itself, divide into itself. That's not supposed to be good, and that concept is widely talked about. That's all over. People talking about that's a bad situation for a room mode. Well, that's what he had. So I'm not saying that that's wrong. What I'm saying is you can work around certain things like that. You can work around it with the right treatment, with the right setup, the right distance from the wall to the desk. And it doesn't matter what he did in his specific situation, because he found a way to make that work. And that's all I'm saying. You guess and you check and you try and you try and you read, you better, worse, move until it works. Until you say to yourself, now I'm happy where this sounds right to me. When I go to the car, it's the same. When I change it, when I try different things, it sounds like I expected. Then you will be able to sleep at night. Until then, good luck doing anything in a straight line, linear fashion. That's all I'm saying. Or get comfortable on headphones, which I don't do. It's not something I could do. So, and it's saying I can't, I know is a terrible thing. I've tried several times. I found a lot of people say I can only mix on headphones. Some people say that. I can only do it in headphones. Everything else doesn't translate. So I understand as a concept, because I'm the opposite. So I totally get it. Some people are probably only comfortable there. I'm the opposite. It's very comfortable for me with speakers and not without. And that's, using a room that has severe problems. So anyway, I also think the better you get at what you're doing, the more things you realize are problems. When you're like a relative beginner, it's really hard to decipher where the problems are that exist. Everything's a problem or everything's not a problem, because it's the same thing, because you really don't know up from down. Whereas once you get a more tuned ear, then you start to realize what's going on more and more and more, because less and less things become a guess. So the things that are now totally missing from what you can hear in the room compared to others, now you hear them. You hear exactly what they are. You start getting in tune with it, and there's no way to just blindly compensate for what you can't hear. It's not like, oh, I can't hear it, so I'll make it louder. You can't hear it. You don't know if it's too loud or too low. And you can't correct it with EQ. You can't. So no matter what, you're going to be a little messed up. And it's going to cause heartache, turmoil, stress, all this. So I'm just trying to keep you guys away from the heartache, turmoil, and the stress. I hope it helped. Tell me what you think also, because like I said, I'm about to take you on a journey where I show you this new place I'm building out, turning into a mix room from nothing. All right. And when we go from there, I'm going to want to look at these comments and use some of these ideas you guys come up with, may be great, because I'm going to be in a guest check position, better, worse position. I'm going to be doing a lot of that. So I would love to read some of these comments and have some great ideas. And I'll shout out everybody who has a great idea, because bottom line is, when I try some of this stuff, whatever works, you bet I'll be telling you about it, because like I said, there's a lot of things that acquired knowledge can give you. And a lot of you guys probably know some stuff about this based on what you've done, experienced in your own room, which may have been specific to that room, but maybe it's also specific to my room. I don't know. But the bottom line is, we're going to go through it. We'll deal with it coming up. So I appreciate it. I love the comments. Hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. You guys got this. Take it easy.